for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
I need your help to get to the year 1985.
You're listening to Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Network.
Good evening. Fade to Black. Bespoke Radio for the masses. Today is Wednesday, August 7th, 2019. 218 days into the new year. Just 147 days left. We are live. We are live from a bunker somewhere in the middle of beautiful downtown Burbank, California. And I would like to welcome everybody listening all around the world, all across the United States. Hither and thither, to and fro, back and forth, up and down, east and west, north and south, far and near. This is Fade to Black for KJCR, the Game Changer Network, and KGRA, the Planet. I am your host, Jimmy Church. What is cracking, everybody? Are you ready? What a week on the show. Amazing week. Amazing. And tonight, cap off this week, Scott Wolter is here. Scott, we are going to do a full wrap-up of the latest season 4 of America Unearthed. Unbelievable. Scott is back. He is the author and host of America Unearthed. Has been president of the American Petrographic Services since 1990. He's also responsible for all of the investigation going into the Kensington Rune Stone since the year 2000. And tonight, we are going to discuss episode by episode the last season of America Unearthed, Season 4. Season 4, Scott. Congratulations.
Hey, Jimmy, thank you for having me on. And I can't believe we're sitting here talking about the season that is now aired and is in the history books. It's just amazing. You know, they just went by so quick. It's hard to believe.
Man, you're a man of the world. You're a man of the world. Hey, Scott, am I on speakerphone? Can you take me off speaker?
I don't think you're on speakerphone.
Okay, that's not. It's just your cavernous research facility that you're sitting in. I see.
In this, you know what happened? I can go to a different room, but we just, about 2 weeks ago, replaced the carpet in our living room with a wood floor.
Oh, so that's what that's what I just said. You're cavernous.
Oh. Cavernous? Well, let me go cavernous downstairs. How about that?
Okay, it's fine. It's fine. Don't even worry about it.
Oh, no, here we go. I'm going to... Listen, only the best for you, pal. How's this?
Scott.
Is this better?
Scott, yes. That sounds great. Did you go into a closet?
No, I'm down in my basement, my rock room, and I'm going to stare at Lake Superior agates and I'm just going to look at beautiful multicolored banding as I talk to you.
I know, right? Man, I have assembled, along with Rita, an amazing collection of crystals and different stones, and I don't have. I have a bunch of stuff here in the bunker, but over at the house now, oh man, it's just incredible. And just
it's a museum, right?
Well, the thing is I pick up different stones like I'm doing now for the camera, and you just look at it, and you're holding history, right? And I wish I was a geologist, or I knew what I was looking at, or how I could analyze the age of it and where it came from and stuff, because you're holding stuff that could be, hundreds of millions, if not a billion or 2 years old. And
that's right.
And that you're holding history. And I'm doing it right now as we talk.
You know what? I love to hear you say that, because I think most people out there don't have that kind of appreciation when they see something like a crystal or a fossil or something that's natural and beautiful, and just stop and think about how old that is. I mean, that in itself is mind-boggling.
Yep.
You can't even put it into perspective, with human life. I mean, it just goes so far back. I mean, if that doesn't sort of, get your attention and humble you up, nothing will, right?
I went into a cave in like Tennessee or Kentucky when I was a kid, and I remember it's all caves down there, right? I forget the names of each cave that is, in each city. They've got the thing going on there, but I went into this huge cave. Looking at, I'm 10 years old, 11 years old, looking at these crystals growing in there. Giant, I don't even know how many feet, huge.
Stalactites and stalagmites.
Right. And I'm looking at, one of them was called, isn't it called like the Giant Crystal Cave?
Yeah, Crystal Cave. That's right. I've been there.
Yeah, it's insane to walk through there. I mean, it's just insane. And they're growing. They're alive.
They are alive. You are 100% right. And they go for miles and miles. In some cases, they go for tens and even hundreds of miles underground. Can you imagine if you ever got lost in there?
Oh, man.
What a horrible nightmare, huh?
Yeah.
Just to think about it.
And people did, yeah, I know. And people did get lost. I just watched, I want to move on, but I just watched a documentary that took place in, I want to say it was Guatemala. I could be wrong, but there's a giant cave system down there. And so they're down there, and they find what they're calling the first human in the Americas. I think that's the title of the documentary. It's a Nat Geo thing, or PBS, and it was of a girl, and I think she was 15,000 years old. I could be wrong in that, but
probably older than that.
Somewhere, but she had clothes, or she had stuff.
Oh, I see. Okay.
But anyway, she got lost. She got lost in the cave. Lost her footing, and was found at the bottom of the cave with animal bones. But she was probably down there looking for water or whatever, and just got lost and
got lost in the dark, and then went off an edge and ended up. Maybe she fell into water too. I mean, it could have been an underground, cave with water, and man, that you go in there, it's lights out.
Yeah, if you got a torch and everything is good, right? You got a torch, it's lit up. Well, you're safe. That torch goes out inside of a cave.
You're done.
You're done, man. You're done.
It's not funny, but it's
right.
Pardon the pun. Lights out.
The lights out. It's a crazy documentary. I wanted to ask you this before we move on. How far, and you may know these answers, you may not, but there's a reason for me setting you up for the last question. How far have we drilled? How deep have we drilled? How deep underground have we drilled?
Into the earth?
Into the earth.
Well, I can tell you, I myself have been in a mine that was over a half mile deep. Now, that's not a drill, that's just a mine.
Okay.
And when I went down there, it was like in the high 80s. I mean, I had to strip off my clothes. I was wearing a T-shirt, and I was still sweating. And that was just the geothermal heat of the earth because I was down so far. And when I went down, it was a snowstorm above, I mean, at the surface. So, you have to think about that. But I think my guess is we have probably drilled at least 10 miles deep, I would guess.
5.7 miles.
Okay, well,
okay, then that's far. I mean, 10 miles. Okay, I'm with you on that. I would guess, but it's 5.7 miles, which is nothing, right? Nothing.
Well, compared to the size of the Earth, that's just barely scratching the surface. Yeah.
Now I'm going somewhere with this. Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
So 5.7 miles deep.
Okay.
Do we have radar or some type of seismic X-ray to look through the earth to the other side? The answer is...
Well, you can use seismic. I don't know if our seismic activity will go all the way through the earth. I think it might have the capability of going through, the lithosphere, around the earth to the other side. But to be quite frank with you, this geophysical work that you're talking about, I'm not an expert on. I know enough to be dangerous, but I can't answer your question with any certainty. But I don't know if we have the capability to go straight through and measure, one side to the other. Maybe we do, but if we do, I'm not aware of it.
Right, exactly. Now, as far as you know, is there a CT scan? Right? Is there an
Where the hell is this
X-ray?
stuff coming from? Where are you coming up with this?
Is there an X-ray of planet Earth? No.
Well, I think as far as actual, an X-ray in the true sense, no. But do we have a good idea of how the Earth is constructed, and we understand how it's made up? Yeah, I think we do. I think we do.
And now that's exactly where I'm going. See, you and I think alike. We don't know much. We have a good scientific idea of what is down there and how the Earth may be constructed and what it is made up of at different levels. But do we actually know? We've only drilled down 5.7 miles. That's it. Beyond that, what is in the Earth's core? What is going on? Is it molten iron that is rotating and causing the magnetic field? And is there molten layers of this and that? And okay, all right.
I think the answer to that is yes, and the evidence is going to be in the volcanic activity that we see happening on the planet all the time. We see that with the movement of the plates. I think that this whole general idea of plate tectonics with the molten, mantle that's plastic and moving, and then a really hot core, that makes sense to me. I mean, again, and one of the most impactful things that convinces me of that is when I went down to that mine. I started off in a snowstorm, and I had to take all my clothes off because it was almost 90 degrees.
Right.
Half mile down. And if you kept going, I got to believe it would get hotter. And maybe the reason we've only drilled down 5.7 miles, which is still a hell of a long ways,
right,
is because the temperatures got to the point where the drilling equipment just didn't work.
So hollow Earth, that's right out then. That's not...
I don't buy that for a second, but that's me. And I can tell you one thing, Jimmy, I have learned that when you don't have a definitive answer to something, you always leave that back door open. But I got to tell you, I might leave the screen door closed and the heavy door open a skosh.
Right.
But I'm you're going to have to work on me for that one.
I have looked at cutaways of the Earth, just like everybody else has since elementary school. Right? We've all seen those. And I've just thought in the back of my mind over and over again, okay, all right, smart minds have put this together, and they have the numbers have been crunched, and the analysis has been done, and to the best that they can put together, this is what is going on. But I'm not alluding to Hollow Earth. That's not where I'm going with this. But where I'm going is that we really don't know. Right? We don't. And it's part of what makes this planet so wonderful is that there are things to discover and there are things to go out there and research. Maybe one day we will have all of those definitive answers and maybe everybody is right. But that's what makes your investigations and things out there so much fun, is that there is so much to learn, isn't there?
Well, I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think your point is a good one. And when we get to one of the episodes, I'm going to come back and bring this up because there were some things that happened this season that really forced me to rethink a lot of things that I thought that I understood. So yeah, and I'll give you another example. I even wrote one of my first book I ever wrote on Lake Superior agates. It was published in 1986. I was in my early 20s, and one of the things I talked about was the Bering Strait land bridge migration and the peopling of North America. Then they went to South America or Central America, across Panama there, and then all the way down to South America. And the last place that they showed up was down near the Strait of Magellan. And guess what? That whole theory that we all accepted as kids is completely thrown out the window. And I pick up that book and I look at that diagram I have, and I'm like, wow, I thought that was it. And now we know I can just tear this page out, and it just doesn't work anymore.
When I was a kid and I would spin the globe around and look at it, there's a couple of things that stood out to me. And number one, the first thing, as a kid, I just looked and it's like, okay, our planet is a bunch of puzzle pieces. This goes here, yeah. This goes here, this goes here. It's obvious. And the other part of it for me, and I've heard this sort of discussed lately, but that at one point, if everything was all put together, then that means half of the planet was water. Right?
More than half, 2/3.
Right. If you put everything together, the rest of the planet's water. And this is the other part that messes with my head. That the water part, when you look at the circumference of the Earth is 25,000 miles, right, or thereabouts, right, plus or minus, at the equator, and at 25,000 miles, the depth of the oceans, which seems deep when you're on a boat, but the depth of the oceans is nothing, actually, right? When you look at the Earth as a whole. The water that's around it is actually a very insignificant part of what makes up our planet. It may seem deep when you're out there.
Volume-wise, absolutely. And in fact, I think in the Marianas Trench, I think the deepest spot in the ocean is, God, I forget now, it's either just over 7 miles or just over 12 miles. I can't remember. But those are the deepest spots. The average depth is much less than that. And, it's just a fraction. But it sure looks like a lot of water when you look at the globe. But in actuality, if you take the actual volume relative to the volume of the rock or of the molten stuff and whatever's in the center, it's just a tiny little fraction.
Yeah, and it's so fascinating to me to think about when we talk about drift and tectonics and what we pretty much, I think we're all in agreement, has been going on and will continue to go on. We're not done with it. This is all new, right? This is new. This is new. This is stuff that came to serious thought in the 1950s, wasn't really accepted in the scientific circles until the 70s. You know, and we're sitting here 2019. You would have thought that this is old, proven, discussed. It is not. We are learning new stuff every single day, aren't we? Well,
you know, this discussion we're having, I can't help but think that some people are wondering, you know, how are they get on this philosophical rant? But I have to tell you, I love it because what you're saying is that, you know, when I look back maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it seemed to me in some ways everything had been discovered, the world had been explored, you know, all the questions that we had about everything was pretty much figured out, right? I remember there was a time in my life when I actually thought that. But the point you're making now is spot on. And I'd love to disagree with you, you know that, Jimmy, but I can't. I wholeheartedly agree that it's almost like there is so much new things, so many new things that are being discovered, so many things that we thought we knew are not what we thought, and actually are something completely different. I mean, archaeology right now is just literally been turned on its head, and you know, I think a lot of this dogma and entrenched beliefs that people have, you just have to throw it out. And now more than ever, you have to keep an open mind. And you know what I was alluding to before was extraterrestrials and alien contact. Even a couple 3 years ago, Jimmy, I wouldn't have even really had any time to discuss it.
I tried to get you to discuss it, and we had to move on.
I wasn't buying it, was I?
No, not at all.
You know what?
Not at all.
I'll take some of that money now. I'll take some. I mean, my mind is wide open. I haven't made up my mind completely yet on this, but to say that I'm rethinking it is an understatement.
Now, well, and we're going to get to episode 2 here in just a second.
Okay.
Let's we're going to start with episode 1, and we're going to do that at the top of the hour. I want to ask you this very, very important question. This season, season 4, which just wrapped, of America Unearthed, was different than the previous 3 seasons, wasn't it? Why did you approach it like this, and what makes it so different?
Well, there's a number of reasons why it's different, but at the same time, I think that there were a lot of things that were the same. I mean, 3.5 years elapsed between the last episode of season 3 and the first episode of this, and quite frankly, I never thought the show would come back. I was happy and moving on with my life and maybe, do something different. I never thought this would happen. I never dreamed it would happen, but I'm glad that it did. And really, we didn't, from a production standpoint, change things too much. Although I think that most of the people that worked on the show before and worked on it this year are just better. I knew what I was doing when I went into this. I mean, when I first got started with America, I didn't know what the hell I was doing, and I felt more comfortable. I don't know if that came across, but I just felt more dialed in. I know that we did fewer takes, that we moved on, and quite frankly, I think we were able to generate better content in many cases because of the experience that we had, and we were able to go on and do more things that we just didn't have time for before because it took longer to get the stuff we needed. The music has always been good. the show is shot beautifully. I mean, you can't say that it doesn't look good. I think our graphics are great. They really didn't change. They might have been zipped up just a little bit, but a lot of people have said they felt like it did have, it was definitely America Unearthed, but there was something different about it. And I hope people, feel that it was different, but it was better than it was before.
Yeah,
at least I think it was.
Yeah, the production value was definitely kicked up a notch, and that comes with time. It's just time and experience. So there's that part of it, but also the flow of the show. This isn't, although it has all of those classic Wolter elements, right? We've got Templars and we've got, lost treasures and we're searching for stuff, Vikings and all. So all of that part is in there. We've got all of the inscriptions and carvings and things to normally investigate, but then you go into other zones too as well, and you started to step outside of your box, didn't you?
Yeah, well, yes. I mean, the thing that was most different about the show was some of the subjects that we looked into. And, you say a little bit out of my box. Well, I think it's not so much what I think as my box. I think it's different subject matters. And the reason I said, I know what people typically think of, the geological-based investigations. But you know something, Jimmy? The process of investigation, regardless of what you're looking into, does not change. If you're investigating, who made this inscription, where did this, carving come from, the rune stone, you're investigating a murder case, you're investigating a bombing, you're investigating Bigfoot. The process is the same. You gather as many facts as possible. You interpret those facts and try to develop some ideas as to what those facts are telling us. And ultimately, if you have enough evidence and you feel like you can draw a definitive conclusion, then you do it. And so it really doesn't matter what you're looking into. That's the process of investigation. That, at the end of the day, is my wheelhouse. I do it mostly with rock and concrete in my normal life, but again, it's the process that's the same. So it really doesn't matter. And actually, I really like the idea that we stepped out of my wheelhouse a little bit and looked into some of these other things. And when we get to those few episodes that I'm talking about, and I think you want to talk about, they were some of my favorites. And quite frankly, I think they were some of the best episodes, and I think, well, I'll talk about one in particular where we actually changed the direction of our investigation based on evidence that we found during the investigation as we were filming, and I think we got it right in the end, and that's the way it's supposed to work.
Let's take a break right here, Scott, and we will come back with episode 1, Vikings in the Desert. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Scott Wolter is here. We are going to do an episode-by-episode breakdown of the last season, Season 4 of America Unearthed. This is Fade to Black. You can follow me on Twitter at JChurchRadio. You can follow Scott at Real Scott Wolter on Twitter. He's right there. I'll be right back after this short break. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Scott Wolter is here. Now, the bunker cam, I actually know what the issue is. Our streaming company did an update today, and which I knew that this transition was going to happen, and we were supposed to have everything up and running for the show tonight. Drew is working on it, and there you go. Okay, I will. I'll keep you updated as we move along, but we should be solid. Okay, and that's what it is. Okay, so just everybody relax. you can do without the bunker cam for a few minutes. Okay? All right. Video's running, though, and we're rock solid in here, so maybe we'll post a video of the show so you guys can go back and watch it. Our guest is Scott Wolter. We're doing an episode-by-episode of Season 4 of America Unearthed. It just wrapped, and we're going to start with Episode 1, Vikings in the Desert. What's going on here, Scott?
Well, that was an interesting episode for a number of reasons. And, what are the odds that, somebody back, and we really don't know exactly when it was found, probably back in the 60s or maybe even back in the 50s, finds a saddlebag with a bunch of metal artifacts that actually turn out to be old Viking era and older artifacts in a cache. And the question, of course, is how did these legitimate artifacts get there? And this was in an area outside of Sedona, which is absolutely one of my favorite places in the world. Geologically, it's just a paradise. It's so beautiful there. But and really, the answer is realistically one of two possibilities: either somebody in recent times, probably within the last 100, 150 years, possibly an immigrant that came from Northern Europe, brought these artifacts to America, and somehow they got lost in the desert. Certainly that's plausible, and in fact, if I had to put money down, I'd say that's probably the more likely scenario. However, the other possibility is maybe there were explorers that came here during the Viking era and made their way to the desert Southwest. Now, at first blush, I'll be the first one to say that sounds like a stretch. However, again, we talked about it. Just when you think that you think you know what's going on and this is got to be what happened, you're proven wrong. And so you have to keep an open mind about these things. So that's what we did. And we looked at it and said, okay, if Vikings did make it here, how the heck could they have gotten here? And I think we laid out the most plausible scenario, coming down the West Coast, probably after going through the Northwest Passage, around the Bering Strait land bridge we were just talking about, Alaska, and then down the coast around Baja, and then up into the Salton Sea, where there just happens to be a legend of a Viking ship that was seen back around 1900. So, that's the premise, and we were actually given access to that incredible audio tape that you heard of a first-hand witness that told what I thought was a very compelling story. That was cool as hell to listen to for the first time. And then go down to Baja and see that incredible petroglyph of what sure looked like a ship to me and what sure looked like a Viking ship. And then talking about the oral stories of the indigenous people. I mean, very plausible. Did it prove it? No, but it certainly left the door wide open. And it was a lot of fun. And
what were the artifacts?
What were the question hasn't been answered.
Yeah, what were the artifacts?
Well, there was actually probably about a dozen artifacts that I saw. I don't know if she had all of them with her, but actually they were broken up into three different groups. There was Viking-era artifacts from, the 10th, 11th century. There were artifacts from the 7th and 8th centuries. And there were Roman-era artifacts going back to, like, the 4th century, 3rd and 4th centuries. So really what you had was a collection of artifacts that spanned, almost 1,000 years in time. So, they weren't all from one site. They were a collection. And, I think some people would, your mind automatically, well, it's probably a modern-day collector. Well, people back in medieval times and before that, they collected things too. I don't think human beings' practices and things that we do are any different now than they were back in history. So they could have been collected back during the Viking era. they could have been collected in the 18th or 19th centuries. We don't know.
It's very interesting. And when we look at the Vikings in a general sense, unless you are a hardcore historian and study these things, most people don't know that the Vikings made it to Paris, right?
Well, they made it to the Middle East, too, and they didn't sail there. They traveled along the rivers, and they walked overland. And I think, a lot of people automatically assume when you think of the Vikings, they think, well, the guys that sailed across the oceans and that they were navigators. Well, they were. But like other cultures and other explorers and marauders, they traveled overland just as well. So, and the other way they could have gotten there is come up through the Gulf of Mexico, the Rio Grande River, and you get pretty darn close to where those artifacts were found, and they could have walked up there. I mean, it's very plausible. At this point, we just don't have enough evidence to draw a definitive conclusion one way or the other. Episode 2, Alien Artifacts. Okay, let me ask you a question, Jim. You watched that episode. Yes. Okay? And if you didn't, that's okay. I'll take you through it. I saw parts of it. I did. Of course, it's called Alien Artifacts. So yes. Well, if that doesn't get your attention, I don't know what will, huh? That's right. Okay, so what's your question? Okay, my question is, first off, what did you think when I called those guys out on that first batch of artifacts? Do you remember when I went through there and I told them not just that I didn't think the artifacts were legitimate, but as I always try to do, is tell them why I don't think they're legitimate. And yes, I do remember that. And this is where the tension, right? The tension that was there. When we get into this zone, it's one thing to talk about Vikings or the Phoenicians, right? That's, we're talking about a terrestrial situation that we can identify with. When you get into alien artifacts and you are in possession of this, you are automatically in a defensive position because you can't prove anything. You can't. Right? And so that's where the tension will, it will always be there. And then there's the third element to this. I think that everybody, it doesn't matter if you're a skeptic or not, or what side of the fence you are on about ET visiting Earth, we know that we are not alone. You can't go into that zone and say, and be that ignorant that we are the only thing in the universe. Okay, so now, we've got that problem where we know that we're not alone. I mean, that is just completely ignorant to think that. So you throw all of these in together, and then you want to call somebody out. Well, it's a tough position to be in, right? Okay, so take us through this. Describe to everybody what these artifacts are. Well, the first group of artifacts were brought to me by a group of guys that are from Mexico, and they're part of a group called the Jack Detectors. And they took me out in the jungle, and they showed me a site where they said that they collected these artifacts. And there was 3 of them that they showed me. 2 of them were sort of flat carved stones, maybe a little bit bigger than your palm. One was of a spaceship. Another one was of an alien-looking creature kind of tucked inside of a Vesicus Pisces vertical almond-shaped pod, or I don't know what it was, but that was and then the third artifact, quite frankly, looked like a phallic to me, and it was made of soapstone, and it had sort of a ball at the top of a rod-shaped thing, and it was carved in the shape of the head of an alien, and I mean, it just looked hokey from the get-go. Well, anyway, so I go out into the field, and I went into these caves where they said they found them. And I remembered I looked at the artifacts before we went out, and I'm always looking at, like the sediment that's in the grooves, because these things they were packed with dirt, right? Mm-hmm. And I remembered what the dirt looked like. And then when I was in the cave, I said to myself, well, one thing that we can do to check the veracity of their story is to see if the dirt in these little crevices, they said, yeah, we pulled it right out of there if the dirt that was in there matched the dirt on the stones. And it didn't. So right from the get-go, there's a problem there. Now, just because it didn't match doesn't mean that they're lying, that they didn't come from there. They could have found artifacts that came and were dirtied up somewhere else or came from another location and were put there, and they found somebody else's practical joke. But clearly, they didn't match, and they weren't even close. And they accepted that. But then the thing that really, and then I showed them, what I thought was evidence of modern tooling on that phallic artifact. And then the one, I turned it around and I showed him, and you could clearly see the letters UFO. I mean, it was, and they looked at that and they just said, hey, and I asked them, I said, hey guys, is there something going on here you want to tell me about? Are you guys playing some type of a joke with me? And, I have to say, what you saw on camera is exactly the way it was. They said, Scott, you're an expert. We asked you here to tell us the truth. And if you say these are fake, we believe you. And we thank you for coming here and taking the time and telling us the truth. And it was such a heartfelt thing, Jimmy. I almost felt bad, but I didn't, about, punching them out a little bit. But, I had to, because clearly they weren't authentic. And I will say this, and I'll probably never see those guys again. I would tell you if I thought they were involved, I don't think they were. I think they honestly found something that somebody else put there.
I went through, this is a few years ago, I went through about, I'm going to take a rough guess here. I'm going to say I looked at about 40 different artifacts from Mexico that were found in this cave. And they looked, to my eyes, this is me, they looked too perfect. In that the representations that are on this, I held a knife, all right, this ceremonial knife, and the knife was about, 2 feet, 1.5 feet long. Yep. Very ornate with these crazy stone teeth on the knife. But on the hilt of the knife is a perfect alien head. Just like we see today in the movies, right? With the eyes and the face.
Oh, yeah, the almond-shaped eyes and the elongate head.
Right. And so,
small face and all that. Yeah.
The guy that had this, who's a radio host in Mexico, he's a very cool guy. He had told me, he said, well, we've had this analyzed, and the dirt and the organic material and the grooves here with the glue that is used to hold this together is 15,000 years old. And I was like, okay, well, and I'm like, this doesn't look like it's 15,000 years old. This thing looks like it was made yesterday. And I went through a bunch of stuff. Well, anyway, he sent me some videos of them going on an expedition with the guys, this team that is going to the secret location in this mountain where he got the artifacts from. And they spend like a day, maybe even 2 days on this hike through the jungle, machetes, no trail, no road, right? They park and they are going into the jungle, right? Hacking their way through. They finally get to the site and they go into this cave and deep in, and this is like 2 days into the expedition. They're sweating. They get down into this cave where there are guys, archaeologists that are in there digging, and they're pulling stuff up. They're pulling stuff up live on camera. That is, in the dirt, in the mud, and they're pulling this stuff out, cleaning it up, and it's alien heads. Like crazy sculptures and things of humans sitting with alien heads at their feet, and they're pulling this stuff out of there and cleaning it up and taking out of this cave system. Now, I was picturing some production room somewhere, some factory, right, that is cranking this stuff out, where you've got a bunch of people around doing this stuff with Dremels, and creating this stuff. And if this is a hoax, they are going to great lengths, macheting their way through the jungle to this cave system, when they could, they could find an easier way to put together a cave expedition than what was presented in this video. It looked gnarly to me. Well, anyway, if you're going to put a hoax together, this is certainly pretty elaborate. I don't know what to make of it there. And so I just saw, they sent me a video recently, and the sculpture, Scott, was, it had to have been, if I'm going to make a guesstimate here, I'm going to say a half a ton. It was probably 5 feet tall, of some kind of stone. I don't know, agate. I don't know, some kind of marble stone.
I think was it a green color? I've seen a lot of them that are made of jadeite, and I'll get into that because I'm actually looking at a whole host of these artifacts right now.
Yes,
that were sent to me that were found, and you're describing the exact same type of situation that I'm actually talking with some people about right now. They've sent me videos, but not only were they pulling out artifacts, there's skeletons there.
Yes. Okay. So let me continue, and then off the air we'll cross-check names and stuff. We may be talking about the same group of people.
It could be the same, but maybe not. But anyway, go ahead.
So in this last video, they've got a pickup truck with this giant statue in the back of the truck. It's all roped up with ropes. It's tied down. I'm going to say it's a seated figure, some kind of king or god or whatever he's seated. And it's probably 4 or 5 feet tall, 4 feet wide and deep. So when I say a half a ton, I don't know, if this is marble. I don't know how much it weighs, but I'm looking at, 8, 9, 8, 9, 10 guys struggling to get this out of the back of the truck, and they put it on the ground, and it's still roped up. But the camera, which is high def, goes over the entire sculpture, and it's aged, it's cracked. It's not like the artifacts. Well, it hasn't been cleaned up yet, but you could tell as the camera's going over it, with the cracks and stuff that are in it. If it was just carved, then somehow they carved the cracks into it too and made it look old. But that being said, on this sculpture, clearly are aliens, flying saucers, ET. The solar system, the universe, star patterns, star maps, all over this thing, front to back. The seated figure is there, but the rest of it's ornately covered with these references to ET. Now, I don't know what to make of what I am looking at here, because if you're going to fake it, I don't know how it could be faked. I'm assuming out of the gate, like you, that this is something modern, but it looks old, and I don't know. I don't know what's going on, and it's all coming from the same region, the same mountain in Mexico.
Well, I don't know if it's the same stuff. I will tell you this: I have been approached by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different groups, not related, not connected in any way, shape, or form, from 6 different parts of Mexico, and we're talking covering all over the map. And they're coming up with stuff that is similar, but not the same. Although, it's weird because there's a couple of the groups are pulling out artifacts that are very similar in style, in size, in what's being depicted. You know, the artwork has sort of a similarity to it. But then there's other areas where they're just, like this one area that I'm working on now, they're pulling out artifacts that are made of this beautiful green jadeite. And some of the pieces they're pulling out, you talk about this statue that weighs half a ton. One of the pieces they have is 12 feet tall. It weighs several tons. And it's the same thing. They can't even move it. And like I said, they've sent me videos. I don't know what to make of it either. And they're all covered with these these scenes of these aliens. There's rituals. There's symbols that are carved on them that look like a language, but I don't know what the hell it is. It's not a language because, and I'll tell you, there's another group of artifacts that I have drawn, these little symbols that cover these things all over them. And I have drawn over 1,000 symbols. 1,000. Not one repeats. Not one.
Okay, I want you to go to Twitter and check out what has just been posted. I'm not sure here, but I think I took these pictures. I think that's my hand in these images. I've just retweeted it. You can see the knife, the ceremonial knife that I was talking about. And
the one that got the guy sitting on the, in a sitting position.
Yes, on the hilt. Yeah, the handle.
And then there's a blade on the end. Yeah, and then there's that sort of a pinkish colored, variegated blade with the sort of light greenish colored teeth on it.
Yep, and I've held this in my hand, and like I said, this is about 2 feet long. It's huge, right?
Yep.
And now that figure that's
Yep.
that the figure that you're seeing there, that's an alien head.
Yes.
At the hilt.
And I looking at some of these other pieces, like I see you got the arrow there, and then you have see the symbols on that fourth piece?
Yep.
That's the exact same kind of stuff I'm talking about. Now imagine I have drawn, now if you look at these, I'll bet you anything, if you look closely at these symbols, you will not find anything that repeats. In fact, I'm looking at it now, and I don't see anything that repeats. Some of them are very similar, but they're not the same. I've got a book with over 1,000 of these symbols on various artifacts. None of them repeat, not one.
Now, if go to the second set of images where I'm holding the hilt.
Okay,
there's a second set, and you can see that right there where I'm holding it up to the camera. And let me get this retweeted. You may not be seeing it. Hold on for a second.
I don't see it. No.
Okay,
I saw the first group. Awakening.
Yeah.
Awakening Man.
Yeah. Hold on for a second. Real Scott Troublemaker. There it is. I got you. Okay. All right. And I'm posting these up here now. Yeah. So check it out. You've got it now. And you can see
there it is.
Yeah, now see that's the hilt, and you can see this guy sitting now and see what this actually is. It's pretty crazy.
Yep.
Now,
no, you know what, Jim? I've seen hundreds of these. You
see the pipe?
I have a bunch of them here, and I'm studying them right now. It's the same imagery, exact same stuff. In fact, it almost looks like the same artist, but there's no way one person could do all these. Now, these smaller pieces and even that big blade you're talking about, that stuff is actually a zeolite mineral, and it's a secondary mineral that grows inside of volcanic rock. And I know it's volcanic rock because I've seen pictures of where they come from up in these mountains, and it's mostly rhyolite and intermediate and felsic volcanics. And that's where this zeolite, this secondary zeolite, what it does is it fills fractures. And they must be mining them out, or it weathers out. The stuff ends up on the ground, and then they polish it and they carve these artifacts. and there's no way to date the rock. I'm sure the rock is millions of years old, but it lends itself to these carvings because it's somewhat soft, but yet it's hard enough to to hold the carvings, and I think these things are incredible artwork.
I know. Look at the
one. I don't know how
one.
old they are, but I do, because at the end of the episode, if you recall, our guest, Mark, I'll just leave it at Mark, tested, the glue from this one artifact, and he got 9,200 years, and then I retested the glue from a different part of the same artifact and got almost the same test result. And if you watch the episode, when I got that test result, I knew the result that he got, but for some reason I didn't really take it that seriously in real life. I'm kind of like, well, yeah.
Okay, well,
I don't
listen.
know why. I just something about it just.
Scott, I got to take a break right here. I got to do it. We'll be
All right. No, you got to get the money, man. Let's do it on the next side.
We'll be right back with Scott Wolter. This is Fade to Black. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Scott Wolter is here. We're doing a Season 4 breakdown, episode by episode, of America Unearthed. Now, we were just talking about, we only got to episode 2, Alien Artifacts, and we've got so much more to cover, Scott, but I want to finish our thoughts. When you get to 9,000-year-old glue, if it's a hoax, how do you pull that off? You said that didn't change your mind.
Well, all I can say is it got my attention big time, and like I said before, I'm not ready to say that these things are authentic. The question now becomes, okay, can you fake that? Could that be part of this whole process of faking it? And the answer is, I think it's possible, but you still have to prove it. Now, one of the ways that it could be faked is you could take a mammoth bone. Right? It's Pleistocene in age, 9,000-year-old mammoth. Absolutely. Is it hard to get? Not really. And you pulverize it and you mix it with a modern adhesive. You might be able to get that date. I don't even know if you can do that, but in theory that makes sense to me. The problem with that is if you're using a modern organic-based adhesive, you mix with this bone, we should be able to tell the difference. That is something I plan on doing, so hold that thought until we get there. But until I prove to myself that this is not faked, I'm not ready to say they're authentic. But, man, like I said before, I am paying attention big time, and it demands further investigation. Because what's at stake, Jim, if these things indeed are that old and they were made by some indigenous culture back at that time? I mean, you've seen the imagery that's on them and the iconography. My God, it's unmistakable that there is alien contact with humans being depicted. Is that what it means? I don't know, man, but it's rocked my world.
There's a factory somewhere cranking this stuff out. If or
there was in the distant past. I don't know. We're not ready to draw that conclusion yet. We just don't know yet.
No, you hit the nail on the head. There's a factory, either back then or now, right? No matter what, they were cranking this stuff out. I held, like I said, I went through about 40 pieces, and it was just it's too much. For your brain to handle, man.
Yeah, well, the last thing I'll say on this is I have seen probably over 1,000 of these pieces. Now, well, I have seen over 1,000, and your brain does kind of say, tap the brakes, man. I can't deal with this. But that's your brain doing that. That doesn't necessarily mean it's reality. We have to, kind of pull ourselves up and, take a step back. And what I always do is I always revert to the science. Let's get some facts here. Let's see if we can figure this thing out. Because if we just let our minds run, it'll go all over the place, and you can run yourself into these dark shadows or these corners. There's no way out. You just got to take a step back, revert to the science, and let's see what we can figure out.
Well, of course, and you would think that with artifacts like this in such quantity, that this would have been exposed. There's way too much of it. There's way too much of it. There was over the years there were a couple of situations like this. I forget the priest that was in Colombia. He had the same issues.
I know who you're talking about.
Right.
Yep, it'll come as soon as we hang up. It'll come to both of us. But I know Father. He assembled a collection of artifacts that were insane.
Thousands.
Gold and silver and just incredible stuff.
Plates, huge sheets of inscribed copper and silver and just
with strange text on them that nobody's been able to figure out, because there are pictures that survive. Oh my God, what's his name? I know exactly what you're talking about.
and they never found out who made those stuff. And I forget. And he had thousands of pieces. And then his house burned down and everything was lost. We have the photographs.
What happened is the Catholic Church took the stuff.
Right.
It ended up going to the Vatican is what happened, but he didn't reveal all this stuff. And what happened was he was sent down there into the jungles, and he befriended the local indigenous people, and the chiefs, grew to trust him. And so they would go into they would send his people into these caves and into the jungles, and they would come back with these amazing artifacts, and they would give them to him. And he stockpiled them over several decades. In fact, I have talked to people that went down there and met him and saw these artifacts before the Vatican came and took them. And they said he was a wonderful guy, and the artifacts were amazing. Some of them were made of gold. Some of them were made of silver. They were just incredible. And they had ancient text, and I remember some of the iconography was very Egyptian-like, and you also see some of the iconography on these alien artifacts, for lack of a better, what are we going to call them, that also has Egyptian iconography. It's incredible.
Yeah, and some of it looks like some of the crop circles too as well. Father Crespi.
Some of the designs and the artwork is incredible.
Father Crespi.
Crespi, that's it. Yep.
Father Crespi.
Yep, you're right.
All right. Speaking of caves, episode 3, Cave of Secrets. I didn't see this episode. What happened there?
Oh, that was a great one. Actually, that was Chris Courtney was a guy who contacted us actually right at the end of season 3, and we didn't have what happened. We thought we were going to get a season 4, and then they sold H2, and that was the end of that. But he was a guy. We were going to do that episode in season 4 back then, and obviously the show didn't continue, so we had to put it off. But when we got renewed, that was one of the episodes that we wanted to do. So we did. And basically, when he was 12 years old, he was in the backyard of the house that he was living in at the time, and he was chasing a salamander, went down a hole, and he pulled a rock out, and he realized there was a cave there that had an entrance with steps that had been mortared in. This thing had been crafted by man that led down into a natural cave, a limestone cave, just like we were talking about earlier. And he was 12 years old at the time. He's in his mid-50s now, and he just wanted to know who made this. What was it used for? It's bothered me my whole life. Can you help me? So if you watch the episode, what we look into is that probably During Neolithic times, it was probably used as a shelter for early indigenous people and a source of water. Later on, it was probably used during the Whiskey Rebellion to get fresh water and to maybe hide whiskey. And that was one of the thoughts that we had, because the Whiskey Rebellion in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania certainly was alive and well there. Later on, we looked into the whole idea of the Underground Railroad, that maybe slaves that were escaping from the South were hiding out in this cave, at least temporarily. And, we really dove pretty deep into that. And then the other thing that we looked into was, could it have been used as part of a ritual chamber for a Masonic-like organization called the Knights of the Golden Eagle? And the reason we looked into the Knights of the Golden Eagle is because Chris, about a month and a half after he found this cave, actually found a Masonic medal for the Knights of the Golden Eagle. So we looked into that, and a couple of really cool things happened. One is we met some people, some older folks that were moving out of a house that back in the mid-1800s, there was a family that lived there that had a young daughter who would bring food. When she was 12 years old, she would cross this field and then cross a river to these caves on the other side of the river, not the Courtney Cave, but these other caves that I actually went and visited, where slaves did hide out, and she would bring food to them. And, if you stop and think about it, that was heroic, because if the family would have been caught, they could have been killed for harboring slaves and for helping them, because it was against the law. The other thing that was really cool is I got to meet a woman named Valerie Still, who actually played in the WNBA. She played over in Europe professionally, University of Kentucky grad, just a phenomenal basketball player. But she is a descendant of a guy by the name of William Still, who worked with Harriet Tubman, helping slaves escape from the South. And he was the guy who would record all the information about these slaves when they came in. They would record their names, their physical features, any historical information, who their owners were, what counties they came from. And we took Valerie and we went to the Pennsylvania Historical Society, and the curator pulled out an original copy written in Valerie's ancestor's own hand, and on the top of one of the pages he opened it to, it said, Harriet Tubman brought these escaped slaves in, and she's reading this. And as we were filming this, Jim, we're all weeping.
Right.
It was so powerful and so emotional. I think it came across a little bit on television, but they really toned it down. I mean, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. It was really one of the most magical moments of any episode we ever filmed.
Now, I did see pieces of this episode. Now that you've reminded me, and what my memory says is the cave was in two sections. One was modern, right, with modern steps and it
up at the entrance.
Yeah,
up by near the top.
Up at the entrance, and then in the back half of the cave, it was untouched, but it seemed
it was natural.
It was natural.
But it was, at this particular time, this past year, I mean, they had all kinds of rain. We're still getting all kinds of rain in the Midwest here, and it was flooded worse than it's ever been.
And in the back half,
but in the end, what we concluded was that the cave was probably used for multiple things over the centuries, right?
Right.
But it definitely was used because there was actually a building that used to exist over it, so it was hidden. And we think it was used for initiation rituals for the Knights of the Golden Eagle. And when I learned more about their rituals, now remember, this is not a sanctioned body. It's not a true Masonic body sanctioned by the Grand Lodge. This is sort of an offshoot that, obviously some of these guys were Masons, and they base their rituals pretty closely to Masonic ritual. But it fit perfectly, and because of that medal, it turned out one of the founders of the Knights of the Golden Eagle used to live in that house on that property. So to me, that was conclusive evidence, along with the medal and the fact that there was a house to hide these guys' activities inside the building and in the cave where they had their initial initiation. So that was a cool episode.
Yeah, it was a cool episode. It was a cool episode, and I'm a little bit jealous, with the Courtney Cave, in that when I was growing up, I never found anything like that in my backyard. But man,
well, Chris was a great guest, and we ended up having the final scene where I delivered all the information to him near the Mason-Dixon line at a distillery, and I had to deliver my lines drinking beautiful Scotch whiskey, and it was really tough sledding, but I got through it.
I'm still looking. I want to buy a house here in Los Angeles. I want to buy a house that's got a bomb shelter, from the 50s.
There you go.
I mean, there's all of this urban legend, about how many homes here, in the suburbs of Los Angeles that come equipped with a bomb shelter. I haven't found it yet, but man, how cool would that be, right?
Well,
in the
I'm
backyard.
Sure there's some strange stuff going on in L.A. in those basements down there, man.
We don't have basements.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot more than anybody realizes.
We don't have basements in California. Isn't that crazy?
Well, you don't need them.
No, in the Midwest or through the entire country, every house has got a basement, family room, whatever. Not here in California. They don't exist. There are no basements.
Basement right now, and I'm loving it. And the nice thing is, when it's really hot in the summertime, you come down here. Oh my God, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
nice
man.
And cool.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Yeah. Episode 4,
All right, which one was that?
The Ripper Unmasked.
Oh yeah, this is one of those different episodes that was kind of, as you would say, out of our wheelhouse. But I thought we had a really cool suspect, somebody who was very famous. I'm not saying that we got it right, but I think we made a really strong case. And, there is something that happened during the making of that episode that has to do with Freemasonry that even now I still can't go into too many details. But what I will tell you is that when I first interviewed the Friedmans, at their house in Long Island, and they laid out their theory about who they thought Jack the Ripper was. It's one of the things they focused on as physicians was the wounds that the Ripper created on the victims during, the murders that he committed. And all I'm going to tell you is that there was a pattern of something that is connected to Freemasonry that I recognized. The problem is it's one of the few things that we are not allowed to talk about, so I can't talk about it. But I was so torn because the investigator in me wanted to run with that, because what it told me is that the Ripper was a Freemason. And what's interesting is our suspect was a Freemason in 1880, and I want to make sure I get my numbers right because similar dates happen in another episode. But let's just say the murders happened in 1886, and I don't remember if that's right or not. But our suspect was raised as a Freemason the year before. He was a Mason that year when the murders happened, and then the year after, he left Masonry.
Interesting. And do you, and I've done a few Jack the Ripper shows here. And I'm not going to go into those details. But the Jack the Ripper case, it's modern enough where we know the names of the victims, we have the locations, we have all kinds of evidence, and it's an insane case to have gone unsolved.
You know what? It is, and I'll tell you, the one thing that would solve that case is obviously DNA, right?
Right.
Because there are some pretty well-known usual suspects, and it's not a long list. And I think that there are some really good candidates, including ours, good candidates. And if we had DNA from any of those victims, surely they must have left his own DNA somewhere on those victims, or his victim's DNA would be somewhere on his clothing or something. But that technology and that science just didn't exist at that time. It's a shame, and we just don't have any artifacts left. I mean, there was a kidney that was sent to the police, for crying out loud. Why didn't somebody save that?
Right. Yeah, I Jack the Ripper for me is not only fascinating, but I think this is my take. I don't think they ever wanted that case solved. Not publicly. I think that they knew.
Well, not the media.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the biggest media frenzy.
It was.
Sold more newspapers and magazines and articles. I mean, and it's kind of sad on one hand, but, you look what's happening today. I mean, the media is all over every word the president says, every candidate says, every, legislator. I mean, it's too much, but there's so much money involved, and back then it really wasn't any different. It was different, but it was the same.
Yeah, no, you're right about that. I think it's a cover-up. I do. I think that they knew exactly who it was, and it was different times in a different place, and somebody got away with it because they could. And I don't know if it was the monarchy that was involved, or if it's politicians or money or extremely wealthy families. I just think that they knew. I think that it's a cover up, and somebody got clean away with it. That's my take. That's why it's unsolved.
Well, somebody clearly got away with murder. There's no question about that. Was it did that person get help? I don't know enough about all of it to say, but they clearly got away with it, and it really makes you wonder if it was our guy. He went on to live many more years after that, and had a very successful career. Arthur Conan Doyle, the guy that wrote the Sherlock Holmes mysteries, he was our guy. But I'll tell you what, if you look into his history, there's some awful fishy stuff that we didn't go into the show that actually makes him even more interesting. So I don't know, whoever it was, he got away with it.
There you go. Now, when we come back, Phoenicians in America. And you know what? I had a friend, I had a coworker. This is many years ago, 15 years ago, where and I'm all fascinated with these subjects, and this guy looked at me and he goes, "I'm a Phoenician." Right? I was like, okay, all right. And he said, "We invented everything. We invented boats and shipping and language and writing, and before everybody else, Phoenicians were the start of it all. We knew everything about this planet." And
well, there's something to be said for that. I mean,
exactly. And he deadpanned me right in the eyes. "I'm a Phoenician."
I'm a Phoenician.
Oh, man.
I want to meet him someday.
Our guest is Scott Wolter. We're doing an episode-by-episode of Season 4 of America Unearthed. It just wrapped. More when we come back with Scott after this short break. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Scott Wolter, one of our favorite friends of the show. We are doing an episode-by-episode recap of Season 4 of America Unearthed. And this is the deal. See, every time that Scott's on the show, he's like, I can't talk about it, Jimmy. You got to wait. I can't talk about it, Jimmy. Can't talk about it, Jimmy. You got to wait. Well, not tonight. Not tonight. Scott agreed with me. Everything will get answered tonight. And we're going to jump to episode 5 of America Unearthed, which is Phoenicians in America. Now, before we get to that, Scott, hasn't everybody, I mean, America, the Americas, they've been visited by everybody, right? We've got evidence of Egyptians and Vikings and, of course, the Templars and the possibility of, maybe even, from Polynesia and Asia, that it was visited by everybody. Why not the Phoenicians, right?
Well, the Phoenicians were here. I firmly believe that. And, we've said this for a long time, that there were cultures coming from all over the world visiting here. And we've explored just about every culture coming here over millennia. And, I just don't understand, although I don't hear the complaining and the pushback like we used to, even in the 6-7 years that we have been doing this show. The pushback it's gotten more quiet, because I think, going back to what you and I were talking about, there are so many new things that are coming out. A lot of what we thought about that doesn't have anything to do with history, it has to do with other stuff, is just been turned on its head. So I think that this old idea that there was a fence around the continent, nobody could get in, nobody got out, it's just ridiculous. And I think more and more people, and I've said this a long time ago, I said, look, I'm not going to go and try to change the minds of people that won't listen and change their mind, the scholars. Their minds are made up. But I'll tell you what, if enough people out there, just everyday people, ask the question, well, this makes sense to me, what's the matter with you guys? Eventually, they're going to have to come around. If enough public pressure is put onto them, they're going to have to they're going to have to do away with their stodgy, outdated ideas. And I think that's starting to happen. I really do.
Now, when it comes to, we're going to get to the Phoenicians in just a second, but when we look at the Mediterranean, and we know that the Romans and the Greeks were boating around, shipping around, trading all over the Mediterranean. There isn't any, well, there's sort of some, and I just watched an amazing documentary about this, about the Egyptians. It's one thing on the Nile. Did they build boats? Forget about the movie Cleopatra and how she, cruised into Rome. But the real evidence of seafaring ships built by the Egyptians that were cruising around the Mediterranean, that gets a little bit sketchy if you follow the dogma of historians. But when it comes to the Straits of Gibraltar and heading out into the Atlantic, is there any evidence of Romans and Greeks and possibly the Egyptians getting out into the Atlantic and heading west?
Well, to be honest with you, I really don't know if we have any tangible evidence like a shipwreck or written records. But actually, I think there are some written records that could be and have been interpreted that way. I'm trying to think of the Mandeans were known to follow the star Merica, which is Venus when it's an evening star. And I think that tradition carried on. And you have to remember, back in those days, if you had knowledge of a place where you could go to get amazing resources, and in the obvious one is the copper that was laying on the ground, the Great Lakes region here where I live. I mean, it's still laying on the ground. Copper was extremely valuable back in those days. In fact, it had antibacterial properties. It was easy to to use. It was malleable, and it was valuable. And if you had a source of it where you could just go and pick it up and you didn't have to mine it, and it was 99.9% pure, are you going to tell anyone? And I think it's pretty well established that these secrets to sailing on the open oceans and the technology and the knowledge that they had to be able to do it was very tightly held. I mean, because that was powerful. It was valuable. And so but it also creates a problem for historians today, because they didn't just write it down and said, yeah, we went over here and we did this and we did it this way and here's how we navigated. That stuff was held very tightly. It was ultra high, top secret. So, but it presents a real challenge for us. But I don't have any doubts at all that they were able to do it and that they did it. No doubt in my mind at all.
And what tips things over, because when we talk about Spain or Portugal or the United Kingdom, this is all the modern era. This is, when I say modern, 1400, 1500, 1600, that's a different technology and a different era, and we're getting into industrial and accurate smelting and you know what I mean, mechanical ideas and navigation. Things started to come into play there. When we are talking about the Phoenicians,
age was beginning. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about the Phoenicians, or we're talking about the ancient Greeks or Romans, where we're getting into a timetable now that starts to get pretty crazy. But even for the Greeks, that didn't happen until 200 BC, 100 BC. Same thing for the Romans. Greece being founded. I'm staying on Greece for a reason, going into the Phoenicians. Greece is 600 BC. And the Rome wasn't set. We're talking about 400 BC, 300 BC, 200 BC. The technology and what they were doing to get around to the Mediterranean, didn't happen for a few hundred years. When we're talking about the Phoenicians, now we are really pushing back the clocks. We're getting into 1000 BC. The evidence of the ships and their depictions and how they were doing things out of, modern day Lebanon, was 800 BC. We have incredible, how do I want to say this? Incredible documentation of what they were doing. And, having an alphabet like they did at 1000 BC and seafaring vessels, they had conquered the Mediterranean by 800 BC. We're getting into crazy town, aren't we?
I don't think it's crazy at all. I mean, look, we were on Crazy Town about an hour ago talking about aliens and the tech. Can you imagine the technology that they had?
Right.
And I mean, if you want to just get crazy, what's to say that there wasn't some higher technology that was brought here or that was discovered going back 10,000 years ago? I mean, now you're talking Phoenicians back 1000 BC. So what? I mean, I honestly, and let's just take the alien possibility out of the equation. Could there have been technologies that were developed to sail the open oceans and go anywhere they wanted around the world? I don't have any doubt about that. I have no problem with that. I think you put constraints on your own mind when you start to say, well, this is what we think we understand, and you go back 500 more years, they couldn't have understood that. Well, I think that's a mistake to say that, because you don't know. And I think the way your logical mind wants to sort of frame it, that can be dangerous. And I don't know, man. I think you just have to really be careful. I personally think they could go wherever they wanted, and they did it for a long time.
They did, and the evidence is clearly there. I remember I was at the Metropolitan in New York, in the mid-'90s, and I went through a Phoenician exhibit, and I looked at this drawing, and I see the date, right? And I'm like, 1050 BC. Say what? Right? and I remember looking at the Met, and I'm looking at the trade routes of the Phoenicians, and it went straight out of the Straits of Gibraltar. We're talking about that a few minutes ago. And they looked at the Atlantic Ocean, and they had the ships to do just that. Why would they stop? I would think that they would just keep going to see what was over the horizon. And
isn't that human nature?
Isn't it though? And they were doing it.
I absolutely think so. And I just, when I hear certain people just poo-poo these ideas, oh, that didn't happen because they don't think there isn't. I mean, what about human nature? Just that's the nature of our species, is to see around the next corner. How much farther do we have to go? And maybe some of these people, they had nowhere else to go. You know, maybe they were in a situation where they were leaving a war-torn country, or maybe they had a bounty on their head, and they're like, let's see, I know I'm going to get my head cut off if I go back, so, that open ocean doesn't look too bad.
That's exactly right.
I mean, who knows? We don't know what was going on. I think when you start putting limits on people, they're gonna surprise you.
Yeah, they traded all the way from Lebanon. Well, what's Lebanon today? All the way across northern Africa. It conquered everything, Carthage, all the way through Spain, modern day Spain, Tangier, and through the straits into the Atlantic Ocean. And I just think that they kept on going. What evidence did you find that they were here?
Well, in this particular episode, there was an artifact that was found just outside of Rock Springs, Wyoming, that was carved on a piece of sandstone, a bunch of symbols that many people looked at and said were Phoenician. In fact, there was an article that was written by Barry Fell back in the 70s, and he said this was Phoenician script, and he actually translated it. Now, between you and me, I give Barry Fell a lot of credit for being, a Harvard scholar with an open mind who not just, bothered to even look into the idea, but published a book, America BC, where he talked about a lot of people making these transatlantic voyages and coming to the Americas and other places. And so I give him a lot of credit. He looked at a lot of inscriptions carved here in the U.S., or I should say in North America, and he said that they were people that came from Europe. And so he deserves a lot of credit for doing that. And I think in some cases he was right on the money. However, I will say that there were many situations that I've looked at where I thought Barry Fell overreached. In some cases, what some people called plow marks probably were plow marks, but he had an interpretation for everything. And I think in the end that worked against him. And it was actually a good lesson for me to learn because, you really have to stay within due bounds and make sure that you don't overreach, even though you want something to be something really badly. You really have to make sure. You have to have the evidence, the support before you open your mouth, because the last thing you want to have happen is have somebody pack it up your rear end and prove you wrong. And, that's a slippery slope, man. And I've really worked hard to try to avoid that. And I just think Barry Fell overreached in some cases, and I think it undermined a lot of the good work that he did do. And this is one of those cases.
Yeah, Barry, so, for the youngsters out there, right? You need to know where all of us come from. And Barry Fell is one of those cats that you just need to go and check him out. In some cases, it's a tragic story on how you want to look at it. But he was a trailblazer. I don't think anybody has had critics like Barry Fell has had. They came down on him as that was. It must have been tough on him. It must have been tough.
Well, and he was the first.
He was the first
academic to step out of line, right? And good for him. He, and like I say, there were many cases, in my opinion, where he was right on, and he was brave, and he said it, and he stood behind it. But on the other hand, there were some other cases where he definitely, I think, overreached, and that's where some of that criticism is. And when you got people coming after you, the last thing you want to do is give them ammo, right?
Yeah, and he did do that. He gave him plenty of bullets for the guns. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, he did. But that doesn't diminish the good things that he did.
No, he did
I
so
definitely
much.
want to make sure that people realize he deserved a lot of credit, and he is worth researching for sure.
Yeah,
and
nobody's
perfect. No. Wait a minute. You and I are, right?
This show is an example of that. Let's get to episode number 6. We're only halfway through the season, and here we go again. We're running out of time.
Are we gonna have to do like part 2 of this? Because you know what, I got to tell you, I loved those first few episodes. There was some fantastic stuff there, but the last half was some of the best stuff we've ever done.
Episode 6, The Spy Who Saved America.
Yeah, that was Valerie Plame was my tipster, and oh my God, what a wonderful woman she is. And I have to say, that woman is an American hero in my eyes. Now, for those of you that don't know who Valerie Plame is, those that were around back in the early 2000s, she was the spy who was outed by the Bush administration, specifically Dick Cheney, because her husband wrote an article that basically was published, I think, in the New York Times, who basically said that the whole Iraq war and the argument that the Bush administration made that it was, that we had to go in and attack them because they had weapons of mass destruction, he wrote that was all BS. And it turns out he was right. But because he wrote that article, they sought revenge against him by outing his wife out as a spy. And that was, pardon my French, shitty enough.
Right.
But the problem is when you out a spy, all of a sudden, all of their associates suddenly become suspects as also being spies, and their lives are in danger. And so it was, it was just really an awful thing that happened. Of course, her career is over, but in any case, she was the one that said, hey, back during the Revolutionary War, George Washington had was basically getting his rear end handed to him by the British in several battles in a row, and he decided that he was going to embrace the concept of espionage, and he set up something called the Culper Spy Ring. Now, the Culper Spy Ring had 5 male members that we know about that were secretly transmitting intelligence messages about British activities in New York City to Washington through this circuitous route that went out through Long Island, across the Long Island Sound into Connecticut, and then back into northern New York, where George Washington's base camp was. But there also was reference to a female spy, and she was referred only to as Agent 355. I find it interesting, and I pointed this out in the episode, but I don't think that they said anything about it. But if you add 5, 5, and 3, what number do you get?
13.
The number of the sacred feminine, right?
Right.
So I thought that was kind of interesting, and I'm surprised, but I'm not surprised, because our founding fathers certainly understood the concept of the sacred feminine, and I don't think it's an accident that they picked that number. But in any case, the identity of Agent 355 has never been identified until now.
So who was it?
Well, it was there were 3 suspects. One was Peggy Shippen Arnold, who was Benedict Arnold's wife, and she was an interesting person, but she was not
355.
suspect.
Right.
She was not. Then the next one was Anna Nancy Strong, who definitely was helping the Patriot cause, and she was assisting in the Culper spy ring, definitely working with at least 2 or 3 of the known agents that were part of that spy ring. And I'm drawing a blank now. Who was the third woman? Anna Nancy Strong. God, it'll come to me. But she was a woman who had helped some of the Patriots who had been captured and put on these slave ships in New York Harbor that were basically dying and under these horrible conditions. And she was helping to rescue some of these people, sneak them out from underneath the nose of the British. And, God, I can't think of her name. Oh, my God, it's terrible. But if you go to my blog, I wrote a blog for every episode. And I have pictures there, and I talk about the episodes. But in any case, the conclusive evidence to me was this woman was given a pension.
Was it Lydia? Lydia Darag?
Nope, that's not it. Nope. If you say it, I'll remember.
Ann Bates?
Pardon?
Ann Bates?
Nope. Nope. I can't think of it. God dang it. Anyway, God, I feel bad. I can't think of it. But anyway, we found a letter that was written by General George Washington during the time of the Revolutionary War, basically ordering her and her children to get rations, and she was given a pension for the rest of her life. Now, Congress and Congress okayed this. Now, she had to have done something, right? And she was living in New York City, and she was getting this intelligence, passing it on, and we identify her as Agent 355, and I'm 100% convinced that we unmasked her. So I'm pretty proud of that. And you know what? All of the guest experts that we had and my tipster were women. And I thought it was very apropos that it was about a female agent. So, and they were all wonderful, beautiful, highly intelligent women that were our suspects and who are tipsters. And it was really a great episode. And I got a chance to thank Valerie for her service and everybody else, the women that have served our country in the past and today. They all deserve our gratitude, and it was great to be able to say something to all of them.
The episode 7, Bigfoot of the Bayou. Now, before we get to the break, we'll talk about this, but just one question. How good was that swamp gas chili? Man, I put some hot sauce in there, and I pounded that down like it was going out of style. It was great. Was it as good as it looked?
It was, man. It was great. Swamp gas chili, that's what they called it. I couldn't believe it, but they did. It was there.
Okay. What side of the fence are you with Bigfoot?
Well, let's put it this way. I really didn't have a lot of interest in Bigfoot prior to doing the first episode we did in season 3 when I got to go to Nepal, which was amazing.
Right.
But, I will say this, Jim. I'm still very skeptical about Bigfoot. And I remember when I went into the first episode, I said, look, unless I see a body or I see a skeleton or shake Bigfoot's hand, I'm going in a skeptic, and I'm going to go out a skeptic. That doesn't mean I'm saying it doesn't exist, because here again, I don't know. But I will say this. Of nearly every person that I talked to who said that they saw Bigfoot, I absolutely 100% believe those people believe that they saw Bigfoot. I believe that they believe they saw him. That doesn't necessarily mean that they saw him, but these people were not lying to me. They saw something, and they believed it was Bigfoot, and I could just see it in their eyes, in their body language, in their voice. They saw something, and it scared the crap out of them. And
you and I are on the same page. Okay, I'm right there with you. Until I see a body, I see something with, but and I'm still kind of there today. But last year, I saw my first set of Bigfoot prints. Right, my first, and in this field, some kids found it, came and got me. We have it in a documentary. You can see the footage. But anyway, this thing is, I don't know, it's like 18 inches, 2 feet, long, 2 to 2.5 inches in the ground. You can see the toes, and we found 4 prints, right? That left, right. They're like 6 feet apart, and I'm standing there, and I'm not even denting the ground, and I'm looking at this fresh print, with the grass inside of it, the whole thing. And it's like it was made a few hours prior in this hard, compacted ground. And I'm perplexed, man. I stepped back from that and went, okay, that's pretty bad. I still don't know.
That has got my attention now.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, the problem I have is there have been literally tens of thousands of sightings over the years, and really all over the world, but yet not one body, not one bone, nothing.
When I get to that, we got 20 seconds before the break. Okay. Look at the panda, right? Panda supposed to be there. Descriptions, drawings, this, that, and that's a 20th century find. Right, that's a modern discovery. They avoided us and were so elusive, Scott, that for thousands of years, I know. Look, I'm still a skeptic. Look, I'm on the fence, but I'm on the fence in the opposite direction with Bigfoot. I just am. I need something more definitive. But I saw that footprint,
and me too. That doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean I'm saying it doesn't exist. I don't know, but come on, man. I mean, footprints are great.
You know what? Seriously,
the video is pretty compelling. I mean, there's got to be a dead one out there somewhere. Come on.
I know, Scott. If you would have been standing next to me, looking at this footprint in the ground and just looking around and then looking back at this.
Getting the heebie-jeebies?
Man, I'm telling you, I lost sleep over that. We got to take a break right here. So our guest tonight is Scott Wolter. We're doing episode by episode breakdown of season 4 of America Unearthed. When we come back, episode 8, Chicago's Mystery Bomber. We're going to get to episode 10. Don't you worry. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I'm your Jimmy Church. Tonight, Scott Wolter. This is the thing about having Scott on the show. The conversation is all, you can say whatever you want, Scott, but the conversation between the two of us is honest. It is a real conversation.
I don't have time for BS. I'm not that smart to remember the stuff it didn't happen. You know?
That's my excuse. Yeah, you can use it. I'm not that smart. Let's get to episode 8, Chicago's Mystery Bomber. We've got to get to episode 10. It's too important. Well, so Chicago's Mystery Bomber.
That was really a fantastic episode because first off, I never even heard of the Haymarket Affair, and the riots and the bombing and that it led to Labor Day. Why we celebrate Labor Day today, and the people that fought for the 8-hour day and decent working conditions and elimination of child labor and the things that we enjoy today. It's just people don't realize that a lot of people died in the fight to get those laws passed. But what was really fascinating was, here's a mystery to this day. Nobody knew who threw the bomb that night on May 4th of 1886. And so what we did was we got the FBI involved, and that was such a cool experience, and we got to go up to northern Minnesota to Camp Ripley, a place that I'd known about my whole life, but I'd never been on there.
Right.
And I didn't realize how big of an area it was, but we went to their bombing range, and we set up a bunch of mannequins, and we recreated. I actually made I made a few of those bombs that were on display at the museum in Chicago, and we blew them up. And, it was really surprising because, at first I thought, well, if you blow up this bomb, it's going to blow people's heads off and arms are going to go flying and, it's going to be just carnage. But it really wasn't like that. And I came to realize after dealing with these guys at the FBI that things like the Boston Marathon bombing was very similar in that, these bombs go off, and at first you see people kind of standing around, and you don't realize how badly injured people are because the shrapnel fragments aren't that big, but they're traveling at such a high velocity. And when we looked at these mannequins after the bomb blew up, only 2 of them even fell over. And I thought, well, gee, that's not bad. And then I started looking closely at these mannequins, and there was shrapnel that had gone through the bodies, like through the heart, through the lungs, through the stomach, through the head. I mean, you don't realize, because at first you just don't see the damage. But there's a lot more damage that happens when these crude bombs go off, and what it does to the human body was really, it was an eye opener to say the least. And and the other thing about this episode that was absolutely fantastic was, the researchers that gave me the information to read, and we all sat down and we agreed that this George Meng guy was probably the bomber. And we were going to investigate him and see if we could make a compelling and conclusive case. Well, as I was doing the investigation, I talked to a historian in Chicago, and this guy, his name was Richard Lindbergh. He was, by the way, excuse me one sec, I was told that Elizabeth Bergen was the woman I couldn't remember.
355.
Yep, Elizabeth Bergen was and I'm so glad. A friend of mine, CJ, she texted me that. She says, Scott, Elizabeth Bergen. And that's who it was. But anyway, getting back to this guy, he was a historian, and he laid out his case, and he said, no, I think it was this guy, and here's why. And he convinced me. So I basically sat down with the field producer, and we called back to Committee Films, and I said, I don't want to look into this George Meng anymore. I think it's this guy, and this is why I think it's this guy. So we changed directions. And the conclusion, the thing that absolutely clinched it, was I was given by this expert with the FBI, Kirk Yeager, Dr. Kirk Yeager, the transcripts from the testimony of the witnesses that were there that night who described the Haymarket bomber. And so what we did is we went to the police station in, I think it was Cook County, I hope I have that right, in Chicago, and a sketch artist, a detective sketch artist. I read the testimony, I gave him the descriptions, and he drew the sketch. And when I pulled out the picture of our new suspect and put it next to his sketch, it was a spot-on match. I couldn't believe it. And, if you watch the episode, I think you'll agree that the new suspect is the guy that threw the bomb. I think we finally unmasked the Haymarket bomber. And what really is important about that is that, if new evidence comes in and it takes you in a different direction, you go there.
Yeah, you have to. You have to.
You have to. And I'm not afraid to admit the first guy we looked at, we were wrong. It wasn't him. And the new evidence took us there, and that's the way it's supposed to work. So I'm really, proud of that investigation. Even though we didn't talk about that during the episode, that's what happened in real life.
Let's get back into your wheelhouse, actually. Episode 9 and Episode 10. Episode 9, Drake's Lost Treasure.
Yes, that was another one that I knew very little about at the outset, but I read a bunch of articles about it, and I really got into this episode. And, there are some things I can tell you about this episode now that I couldn't talk about before. But we had one guest who had all kinds of what he thought was evidence that proved that were the actual artifacts that Drake used to make the land claim plaque. He thought he had some of the treasure that Drake had found, and he showed us all kinds of stuff. And I have to say, Jim, not one of these things, not one of them was legitimate. Not one. And so what happened was we spent like 2.5 days with this guy, and we can't use any of the content. And, he believed what he had, and I'm just telling him, dude, none of this is good. None of it. So we had a relatively small amount of content. And so that's why you see a lot of reenactments in that episode. And by the way, the guy who plays Francis Drake is a brother Mason, an actor and a sound guy who actually worked on season 3 of America Unearthed, and we got to be really good friends. And he's become a Freemason. But the actor who plays Francis Drake is a guy named Tom Colvin. I actually saw him tonight at Lodge. He's a great dude. And anyway, that's why you saw so many reenactments there, because a lot of the content that we filmed we just couldn't use. And that plaque, I think that plaque is real. But we had a power tripping person at the library, at the Bancroft Library there, who wouldn't let us do the XRF testing that they'd already agreed to let us do. And the sad part is, if we could have done the XRF testing and tested the buildup on the artifact, if there was organic material there, we could have taken a small sample. We could have dated it. We could have proven one way or another. That can still be done. And they wouldn't let us do it. I will tell you this. At lunch that day, after we left that library, I have never been so pissed off in my life. And it was unnecessary. It should never happen. And it had nothing to do with, personality conflict. It was just a power-tripping single individual that just said, no, you're not going to test it.
Yeah, and that'll stop. I just watched a series on Tesla. And the crew, and they've been guests on this show, and I've also had them over on Coast to Coast. But they fly over to the Tesla Museum, and they get there. It's like Romania or something, right? And so they get to the Tesla Museum, and they're looking at the stack of documents about the amount of crates and things that were taken from Tesla's home with all of his documents. Yeah. And there's a miscommunication in these documents about how many trunks of documents there were. The FBI says one thing, the State Department says another, the museum says another. And so they were like, okay, well, and he goes, this is the museum curator, right? Left over from the Cold War kind of guy. And they're at the stack of documents. Okay, but who signed the documents on the last? But you can't see that. You can see the top page. And we're like, well, wait a minute. We just flew from the United States, right? And it only takes.
We bring a crew over here of X number of people, and you're going to tell us that we can't do what you told us we could do? What the hell?
One guy power tripping killed it.
Exactly.
So
in this case, it was a woman, but I will tell you, I have never been so pissed off in my life. I was so pissed I didn't eat. I couldn't eat lunch. That tells you I was mad. But you know what? We moved on and we finished the episode. There's one thing that did not make that episode. We were up at Whale Cove, and when I talked to the archaeologist, and we thought maybe this was where Drake could have brought his ship and repaired it. I actually dove in that harbor, in some of the roughest waves you'll ever see, and they cut that whole segment out because it really didn't make sense to go diving there. There was nothing there to see. It was supposed to bring in a little action, but it just didn't make sense, so they cut it. But what you would have seen is there was these beautiful seals that were swimming with us in the water. And I popped out at one point, and about 5 feet away, here's this, this seal. I was looking right at his face, and you know how they talk about ancient sailors would see mermaids, and a lot of people believe that they were the faces of seals?
Yep.
And I'm telling you, they look human. And it was creepy as hell, but they were so cute. It's like you're not afraid on one hand, but on the other hand, it's like these things are big too. Anyway, it was really fun, but that didn't make the cut.
The cutting room floor. The finale.
It's in Pixel Heaven, or the Pixel Purgatory, wherever that is.
Episode 10, the finale, Exodus of the Templars.
God.
Now,
did you watch that one? Tell me you watched it.
I did.
Okay.
I do want, because there are some spoilers involved here, I want everybody to go and watch the entire season. Right now, the season isn't available for streaming online. I've got everything locked down and is taping. And the Exodus of the Templars is not playing for another 2 days on Travel Channel. I think it's on the 10th and the 12th of August are the replays. Yeah, I'm all over this. So everybody that's listening right now is going to go to Travel and set it up so you can tape it or watch it. And there are some spoilers involved here, but I told Scott that we had to discuss episode 10. It is too important of an episode. You did confide with me that it was certainly the only way to wrap up the season, and that it was probably the most important show that you've ever done. I will agree with you.
It was a fantastic episode. It's in my opinion, it's by far the best episode of the season. It's right up there with the two-part finale of season 3,
right?
Episode 12 and 13. But this episode that we're talking about should have been 2 episodes. There's a lot that didn't make it. And it's unfortunate. But what did get in there was epic.
Now,
I really, and I'm not just saying that because you know me. I'll be honest with you. There were a couple episodes early on that, the Phoenician episode with that artifact, I wasn't wild about that episode. I didn't think it was a great artifact. It was fun to look into the possibility and everything, but man, this episode's got everything. It was.
Now,
I thought it.
Here's the spoiler alert. I want to get to the key part, and then we're going to back up to the beginning of the episode. But the key part about this, and I thought Scott was just given a gift from heaven here, where you've got
which one?
You've got a stone. You've got a stone that is engraved. Something not only so tangible, but it's exactly where your expertise lies. And I'm watching this. I'm like, Scott is just given. This is a gift. This is a gift.
It doesn't get much better.
No,
it would have. The only thing that would have been better is if it had a hooked X at the bottom in the middle, right?
No, I thought that's where it was going. Actually, I thought, here we go. We're gonna have a hooked X.
It was just. Actually, though, Jim, I have to tell you, I've known about that inscription for almost 10 years.
And we couldn't talk about it.
I've been sitting on it because we just wasn't ready until now.
But now we can talk about it. So tell us the stone. I want you to describe it for everybody. But it's about, I don't know, 1.5 feet square, right? On the face.
Actually, if you're talking about the one in Newport, right?
Yes.
Yeah, It's called the In Hoc Signo Vinci stone, which it's a Latin inscription in block letters, and it basically means, in this sign thou shalt conquer. The legend has it was first uttered by Constantine back in the 4th century before he went into battle. And it's been used by various, groups for ever since, including the Knights Templar. And it's right there. But actually, what you may not realize, and as I watch the episode, I'm going, God, we didn't talk about this, we didn't talk about that, because we couldn't. We just didn't have enough time, because it was so much. But it's actually a bedrock outcrop. That was bedrock. That's not a loose boulder like the Narragansett runestone or the Kensington stone. That is the bedrock. But what happened is, if you notice, there was a concrete wall right behind us where we were passing supplies down and things we were using to test it. But that seawall was put in there about a century ago, and it changed the dynamic of the beach. That's why that rock is now buried. But in the past, it would have been exposed, right?
Right.
And probably stuck out of the ground, maybe 4, 5, 6 feet. And in this sign, thou shalt conquer. And it's about a mile away from the Newport Tower. And across the bay is the Narragansett runestone inscription with a hooked X. So, I've been arguing that the Templars came over here around 1400 and built the Newport Tower, carved the Narragansett runestone, and, what else would be connected? In this sign thou shalt conquer. And you remember that the dimensions that they laid out the inscription were exactly 2-to-1. Exactly 2-to-1. And that oblong square, as we call it in Freemasonry, is a very important, indeed sacred ratio that is found in our lodges. It's the dimensions of all kinds of important things throughout history that are related to Templarism and Freemasonry. Was that a coincidence? Hell no. None of this is coincidence. This is absolutely intentional. And the weathering was fantastic. The technology we were able to use was amazing. And how about the archaeologists we got? How about that?
Yes.
Did you?
Yes. And
Wait, let's me while we've been talking on the phone.
Oh, what did he say?
He said, "You're doing great. Are you going to talk about our episode?" I said, "Yes, Brad." I said, "We will."
Well,
who we're talking about is Brad Lidge, who is a retired former Major League pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies, who threw the last pitch, I think it was in the 2009, somebody can Google it, World Series. And while he was, and he retired in 2013, but while he was still in Major League Baseball, I remember he was telling me, he goes, "Look, Scott," he goes, "when I'm traveling on the road," he goes, "you can only watch so much TV, you can only play so many card games." He said, "I decided to go back to college and get my master's in archaeology." And the dude is smart. He's such a good dude. I mean, I can't even tell you. He's humble. He's just great. And so we have some plans. There are some things that we want to do, but he was the archaeologist that we brought with us. And, if you watch the episode, you'll see he isn't some guy who's just pandering to me.
Right.
He's asking some hard questions, but at the same time, he's open-minded, and he's going, "You know what, Scott? You got a pretty compelling argument here. I think you're onto something." And, he's not saying that just because he's my friend or anything else. He's saying it because he really believes it.
There is, you go on the record in this episode where you're talking about the Narragansett stone. Yeah, where you say definitively that there is no questions about this being authentic, that this is what it is. This is real.
Of course. Well, and as far as the In Hoc stone goes, I think the preponderance of evidence in both cases. Look, we have oral tradition that takes these things back 100 and 150 years at least. So, who knew about the hooked X until I published my book in 2000? Nobody knew about the hooked X. And using it in the proper context, are you kidding me? Look, there is zero evidence that speaks against these things. And how can there be evidence against them if they're real? That evidence can't exist. This is what a lot of people don't understand. So we're seeing that there is actually, and there's more evidence of the Templars being here. And this is part of a much bigger story about how this country was really founded and what those tenets and principles are that are what the founding fathers intended. And I got to be honest with you, and I don't want to get into a political discussion, but I'm telling you that the politicians on both sides of the aisle have lost that. They have no frickin' clue what the Constitution is really all about and what this country was founded upon. And I really think that it creates an opportunity for us and for me to make sure that we get this evidence out, that the true story of the founding of this country, which started with the Kensington Runestone as the initial land claim, the stake in the ground, and that obligation was passed on to our founding fathers who finished the job, who were all Freemasons, and not just Freemasons. They were also Knights Templar. I hate to break it to people. That's something most people don't know, but that's a fact. And these artifacts, like the ones in Newport, the Narragansett Runestone, the Inhoque Signo Vinces, and my God, the Newport Tower is the most important stone and mortar structure in this country. There should be a museum built around it. And yet we're still talking about it today. People go, well, I think it was the... It's so maddening, Jimmy. It makes my skin crawl that we're not treating these things with the respect they deserve, because this is the true history of the founding of this country.
Well, and we've got 1 minute left, Scott, and I want to thank you first for not only this show tonight, but for all of the work that you do. I know that the season just wrapped, but are we going to see a season 5? Are you already working on it? Well, no, we're not working on it, and I don't know if we're going to get a season 5 or not. And I really have mixed emotions, because I would love to do a season 5. I think I know that there's plenty that we can do, but I also want to continue to do the story that is still out there. There's a lot of content that we have not shared yet that has to do with the Templars and the founding of this country, and it's amazing stuff. So I really want to do it, and if America Unearthed is a vehicle, that'd be fantastic. If not, we'll do it somewhere else. But if this does turn out to be the last season, and I don't know if that's going to happen or not, all I can say is I've been so lucky and so fortunate. I thank History Channel, H2, and Travel Channel especially. They treated me so well and gave us this opportunity. I'm really grateful, and I'm grateful to you too, Jimmy, because all kidding aside, we have a lot of fun on your show, and we laugh and get into all this crazy stuff. But I really appreciate having this outlet. You're a great dude, a good friend, and I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Scott. Give my best to Jan, and I've got my fingers crossed. So do all of us for a season 5, and we always look forward to your next venture. Thank you so much, Scott. All right, we'll chat soon, bud. Scott Wolter. And this is, you can go to, it's all simple, hookedx.com and scottwolteranswers.blogspot.com. All the links are over at jimmychurchradio.com, and you can head straight to Travel Channel 2 as well for a full schedule on Season 4, Episode 1 through 10 of America Unearthed, and get it recording now. Fade to Black's executive producer is Rita Camurian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm, Renee, Dennis, and Bob. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vitoa, Mark D. Kovar. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network, and syndication is KGRA, The Planet. It's broadcast owned and copyrighted 2019 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network. The It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, Fader Night, open lines all night long. Until then, everybody be safe. Go Backley Tappy.